David Blevins, good to have you back on the pod. I hear you had some fans asking for you to return.
Someone called the Sultan of Brunei, I think that means he's Scottish, posted at the weekend, when you coming back to the Trump 100 podcast?
Well, there you are. You are back and you're very welcome. It's good to see you. I'm Mark Stone in the Sky News Bureau here in Washington, D.C.
And I'm David Blevins, right next to you here in the studio.
And plenty to get into today. The government on this side of the pond still in shutdown. Neither the Democrats nor the Republicans seem to be backing down.
Plus, talks continue in Egypt over Trump's 20-point peace plan for Gaza. Will the president secure what he needs to boost his Nobel Peace Prize ambitions before the winner is announced on Friday?
But first, court is in session. Will the highest legal minds in the land continue to expand Donald Trump's powers? Now, David, before we get stuck into the Supreme Court and all of that, I wanted to take this opportunity to remind everyone listening that until the end of this week, we're running a Trump 100 survey. You can find the link in the show notes of this episode. We love making the podcast. We want to make sure we're doing it in a way that you like. So please do fill in the survey. It only takes a couple of minutes, and we will try and take everything that you say on board.
So it's the first Monday of October, and in the United States, that marks the start of the Supreme Court session. The 9 top judges in the nation met on Monday at their HQ, number 1 First Street in Washington, D.C.
Do you know, I didn't know that. I did not know that was the address, which is terrible. I would have failed that particular pub quiz question. I've been here a long time. I should know that. Number 1 First Street. There you go. And the cases the justices have on their dockets this time around are hugely consequential. They really are massive, focused in large part on how much power the Constitution gives to the president. And the biggest of these is the question over the 14th Amendment and the right of those born in the United States of America to be American citizens. Remember that birthright citizenship, that right to be able to be American simply by the fact of being born here. Now, Trump wants to do away with this, and the Supreme Court must now rule on whether President Trump exceeded his authority when he issued that executive order.
The result of that could have enormous implications across America. Redefining the 14th Amendment would change the status of millions of children soon to be born in this country. The court will also be looking at culture war issues like trans athletes in sports and whether the state of Colorado is allowed to ban conversion therapy for minors. Conversion therapy, of course, is the practice of therapists through counselling trying to change a person's sexual orientation. A number of European countries have banned the practice outright already. They'll also rule on tariffs this session. And there's the small matter of Donald Trump still telling people, you're fired. The Supreme Court will consider whether he acted improperly when he sacked Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook.
Yeah, worth remembering that the Supreme Court, 9 justices, are currently heavily stacked in the Conservatives' favour. A third of the justices were appointed by Donald Trump. Not only that, but 2 of the 3 appointed by George W. Bush, Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito. They are among the most right-wing conservatives on the bench. Both of them seem to be in fundamental agreement with Donald Trump on pretty much every issue. And that's why the court has been seen as one of the most controversial Supreme Courts ever, starting with the repeal of Roe versus Wade. We all remember that, and the end to nationwide abortion access, a decision made back in June 2022. And since then, the court has tacked to the right repeatedly. Things like affirmative action in the United States have been upended, despite being a fabric of American society for decades in the fight for civil rights. Trump was given a form of presidential immunity by the court as well, in a move that protected the president from some of the felonies that he was alleged to have committed.
And Mark, public trust in the highest court in the country is at its lowest, an approval rating of just 39% in July polls. Just 14% of Democrats approve of the Supreme Court, compared to 79% of Republicans. So I think that shows just how split it is down the political lines.
Yeah, it's going the Conservatives' way, and they love it. One of the first items on the in tray this week was an appeal from Ghislaine Maxwell. Remember her? The Supreme Court on Monday morning rejected an appeal request from the imprisoned girlfriend of the paedophile Jeffrey Epstein.
Yes, Ghislaine Maxwell has been in prison for nearly 3 years. She was convicted on 3 counts of assisting Epstein, her former boyfriend, to recruit and groom underage victims. During her trial, prosecutors alleged that she had befriended these girls, some of them as young as 14, been involved in transporting them to his residences and on occasion been present when the abuse took place. Her lawyers took the case to the Supreme Court, arguing that she should be granted an appeal because Epstein had made an agreement with prosecutors in Florida not to prosecute him or any potential co-conspirators. Her lawyers said that agreement applied to one of her 3 counts, even though she was prosecuted in New York, not in Florida.
Yeah, so her lawyers argued that this agreement applied nationally, not just at state level. The Justice Department disagreed and said that it was if it had been a national agreement, then there would be a record of that, which there isn't. And so the Supreme Court sided with the Department of Justice here in one of its first actions of the new court session. In terms of what happens next for Maxwell, her lawyer has said that the fight isn't over. They're pursuing various judicial avenues as Maxwell fights her 20-year sentence. So this issue won't go away. And actually, David, in the last few minutes, Donald Trump himself has been asked about this issue and whether he would consider pardoning Maxwell.
Is that something you're
Who are we talking about?
Ghislaine Maxwell.
I haven't heard the name in so long. I can say this, that I'd have to take a look at it. I would have to take a look. Did they reject that?
She wanted to appeal her conviction.
And what happened?
They said that they were not going to hear her appeal.
I see. Well, I'll take a look at it. I will speak to the DOJ. I wouldn't consider it or not consider it. I don't know anything about it. So, but I'll speak. I will speak to the DOJ.
Why would she be a candidate for clemency, sir?
I don't know. I mean, I'd have to speak to the DOJ. I'll look at it. I have a lot of people who have asked me for pardons. I call him Puff Daddy has asked me for a pardon.
But she was convicted of child sex trafficking.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to have to take a look at it. I'd have to ask DOJ. I didn't know they rejected it. I didn't know she was even asking for it, frankly.
So I think, certainly one to watch. Donald Trump has mused over the idea of pardoning her before. That would be massively controversial. It's certainly something that is not off the table.
And when her lawyer said the fight goes on, he was asked whether that meant they would be pursuing a pardon, but he declined to comment.
So the Epstein saga, it clearly rumbles on. Remember, it took down Peter Mandelson, our ambassador here. A little update on that. Well, a lack of an update as it is, because clearly Britain is still without an ambassador in Washington. And the latest I'm hearing is that they're in no hurry to replace Peter Mandelson. They have a charge d'affaires, as it's known, a deputy ambassador who's effectively stepping up. But what I'm hearing is that the UK government may not announce a replacement for Lord Mandelson, perhaps until the new year. I guess you could argue there's no need to rush it. The UK's in a good place with the administration here at the moment. And of course, David, they don't want to mess this one up again. They messed it up royally with the appointment of Mandelson, given his baggage. So they want to get it right this time. Now then, in other legal news, the president continues to face legal battles as he tries to deploy National Guardsmen and women in blue cities, democratic cities across the country. On Sunday, for the second time in 2 days, a Trump-appointed federal judge in Oregon temporarily blocked the deployment of National Guard members from anywhere in the United States to Portland, that major city in Oregon which Trump says is, quote, on fire. The authorities, incidentally, in Portland reject this. This news by this judge in Oregon comes a day after the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, as Trump calls him, threatened to sue the administration if California Guard members were sent across the state line to Portland, Oregon.
Yeah, that's in Oregon and in Illinois. Officials sued Trump and his administration in a bid to stop the deployment of 200 National Guardsmen from Texas to, in their words, protect ICE agents in Chicago. Immigration agents have been accused of firing tear gas on the streets and raiding homes during the night. The mayor of Chicago has vowed to establish ICE-free zones. And the governor of Illinois, J.B. Pritzker, called it Trump's invasion.
Let me be clear. Donald Trump is using our service members as political props and as pawns in his illegal effort to militarize our nation's cities. For weeks now, Donald Trump, Kristi Noem, and Gregory Bovino have brought their militarized CBP and ICE agents to the streets of Chicago to cause violence and chaos in this city. They need to stop inciting our city's residents.
In an emergency hearing on Monday, a federal judge declined to immediately block President Trump's deployment of National Guard troops to Chicago, despite Pritzker's lawsuit. A hearing on the issue is now set for Thursday. Meanwhile, troops from Texas are on their way.
Yes, J.B. Pritzker, of course, no friend of the president, has clashed frequently with the president. He is a politician now, a businessman of many, many years. Donald Trump often calls him a failed businessman. He is part of his family owns the Hyatt chain of hotels. And he has consistently clashed, as I say, with President Trump, specifically over this issue of law enforcement in his cities, Illinois. He's one to watch as well. Some say he will make a run for the presidency in 2028. Now, David, since our last podcast, things have moved significantly in the push for peace in the Middle East. Word came from Hamas late on Friday, Washington time, that the group had responded to Trump's 20-point peace plan for Gaza, which he unveiled at the White House last Monday with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The Hamas response was not an unequivocal acceptance of the peace plan, but it was not an outright rejection of it either. It was a sort of yes, but. We've kind of got used to that sort of response from Hamas. This time, though, Donald Trump appears so keen to push things through that he's kind of jumping the gun, and he's taking this partial acceptance by Hamas and he's framing it as a full acceptance. I was really struck by the language that Trump used on Friday, both in social media messages and then this statement from the Oval Office.
This is a very special day, maybe unprecedented in many ways. It is unprecedented. But thank you all, and thank you all to those great countries that helped. We were given a tremendous amount of help. Everybody was unified in wanting this war to end and seeing peace in the Middle East. And we're very close to achieving that. Thank you all, and everybody will be treated fairly.
So it's very clear that Donald Trump really does want a deal this time. And what was so fascinating about his statements on social media and that statement in the Oval Office is the pressure that he is putting on Israel this time. He's kind of got Bibi in a corner on this. Netanyahu is in the corner, and he said to him very straight on Friday, stop bombing Israel immediately. Well, guess what? They didn't. On Saturday, the bombing was intense again, scores killed. Sunday and Monday seem to have been a bit quieter, but there's no question that Israel's activities have not stopped, and clearly this jeopardizes things.
Jeopardises things, but the talks are now underway. On Monday, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said that indirect technical talks were happening in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. Officials from Egypt and Qatar shuttling between Israeli and Palestinian delegations.
Yeah, I think what this proves is that despite Donald Trump framing Hamas's response as a full acceptance, clearly it wasn't. Otherwise, if it was, they wouldn't need to have talks. But they've got to have talks at a technical level to work out the details, specifically how to create the right situation on the ground to allow for the hostages that are alive to be handed over. Hamas, I'm told, knows where all those hostages are, but it doesn't know where all the hostages who have died, where they are, where their bodies are. It's claiming that some of those bodies are under the rubble. Trying to get them out will take a significant time. Another challenge is, and we've talked about this before, but Hamas is not sort of one group. It is a variety of different people, some of whom are going to be much, much more hardline than others. We know the political wing is now in Sharm el-Sheikh where these talks are taking place. Some still in Doha. They have views about where this should go. Then there's the military wing still in Gaza, much more hardline. And then there are other factions as well who will be holding some of these hostages. So that is very complicated. The other issue is that Israel appears to want a veto on which Palestinian prisoners it releases from Israeli jails. For Hamas, that's probably not going to be a runner. but you can see why Israel would want to have that veto, because they're not going to want to release some of the most, as they would see it, the most dangerous terrorists that they're currently holding in their jails. So this gives you a little sense of how complicated this process now will be, despite the fact that I think it is worth saying that we are in a much more positive position than perhaps we've ever been. And don't forget, today marks 2 years since those Hamas attacks on October the 7th. So Jared Kushner, who's Trump's son-in-law, and Steve Witkoff, who is the Middle East envoy, both of them are playing a major role in Egypt right now. They're in Sharm el-Sheikh along with a delegation from Hamas, a delegation from Israel, one from Qatar and one from Egypt, all of them in a hotel trying to hammer out this deal. But it is going to be very, very complicated indeed.
It does, though, seem as if we're closer than we've ever been at any point since the attack of October 7th, 2023, to a deal that might end this war. Close enough, as you say, Mark, for a US president to have ordered Israel to stop the bombing of Gaza, the first time that has happened in almost 2 years. But there are huge hurdles to be overcome, not least who's going to govern Gaza in the interim.
Yeah, who is going to govern Gaza? That we just don't know at the moment. Some sort of a technocratic organisation that would be made up of people who are not Palestinian in the short term, at least. And I think that is a kind of a dangerous echo of history, because I was looking back at my notes from those days 2 years ago after the October the 7th attacks. And one of the things that I and others, we talked about a lot, was the fact that the attacks didn't come out of nowhere. They came as a consequence of Palestinians being left out of the conversation, not for years, but for decades. Yes, people often come out with that line that Palestinians never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity, maybe. But it is also the case that moderate Palestinians were consistently undermined, consistently left out of the conversation. And out of that came an extreme form of Palestinian terrorism in the form of October the 7th. And so I'm struck that this time around, at least in the short term, Palestinians do not appear to be part of the conversation for the day after plans for Gaza. And I think that is potentially a worry. And then the other issue, kind of more technical but so important, David, is disarmament. Hamas has not committed to disarming in this response to Trump's 20-point plan. They're pretty woolly on that. So how will that develop over the course of the next few days, weeks and months? It looks likely that Tony Blair will play a key part in this process. Some will be dismayed by that. Some will think maybe he does have the right sort of characteristics, the right experience to be able to do it. David, you dealt with him a fair bit, didn't you, during the peace process in Northern Ireland, the Good Friday Agreement in Belfast. Take us back to that time, because Blair's role there was absolutely crucial. We kind of often think about Blair and his legacy being Iraq, an absolute disaster. But if it hadn't been for Iraq, then maybe his legacy would be rather more positive in Northern Ireland.
Yes, Tony Blair and Bill Clinton both described the Good Friday Agreement as their greatest achievement. Tony Blair brought three things, I think, to the table. He showed commitment. He spent more time in Northern Ireland than any other British Prime Minister ever had. So he had a real hands-on understanding of the complex issues at the heart of the conflict. He had an ability to build personal relationships, to strike a rapport with people you wouldn't expect British Prime Ministers to be doing business with. His Irish counterpart, Unionist leaders, but particularly Sinn Féin leaders. That was really risky, because we were talking about a peace process getting underway just 10 years after the IRA had attempted to assassinate a British Prime Minister. And he was pragmatic rather than ideological, and that proved critical. The Good Friday Agreement is often described as a masterclass in creative ambiguity, and it feels like that's what the Middle East needs right now. But it worked. It worked in Northern Ireland. He persuaded people that the greater good, the end of the bombs and the bullets, didn't require there to be a winner and a loser. It required compromise. And perhaps that's why President Trump is framing the Hamas response as acceptance of his peace deal. Perhaps he is acknowledging that it is some kind of compromise.
Yeah, I suppose the difference is that Northern Ireland was literally Tony Blair's backyard. It was his challenge, his problem to fix. And so he did. But the Middle East is not. And there will be many people that don't look to Northern Ireland, that look instead to his legacy in the Middle East, in Iraq, and wonder if he really is the right man for this job. Let's see.
On the disarmament issue, Hamas completely ignored that in its statement, and that didn't surprise me at all. The decommissioning of weapons was the last thing the IRA wanted to talk about during the Northern Ireland peace process. There had to be a decommissioning of the mindsets first, and that's the big difference, I think, between where the Provisional IRA was and where Hamas is. The Good Friday Agreement gave Sinn Féin, the party that used to be described as the political wing of the IRA, legitimacy in a democratic process. They literally swapped guns for government. There is no equivalent incentive for Hamas. Israel, the United States, many other countries still designate it as a terrorist organisation, and that limits the motivation and to disarm. The US played such a key role in the Northern Ireland peace process. It's got to be realistic about the chances of Hamas giving up guns anytime soon. It was 11 years after the Good Friday Agreement before the IRA finally disarmed, Mark.
Just before we go, we should say that the government is now into its 7th day of shutdown here in the United States. Another Senate vote on Monday failed to break the deadlock. Democrats and Republicans are dug in. The Democrats want to extend healthcare tax credits that expire at the end of this year, while the Republicans say that it can all be sorted out at a later date, before the December 31st deadline. Meanwhile, as federal employees are sitting at home, unable to go to work, the president says mass firings of federal employees could take place to get employees off the payroll, although we don't yet have any details of that. David, lovely to have you on the podcast, and really, really fascinating to get your reflections of one peace process as we are in the midst of another.
And good to be back, Mark. Thanks so much for listening, and do send your emails over to us on Trump100 at sky.uk.
We will see you tomorrow.
Bye-bye.